Hi. I want to talk about why happiness is a serious issue. In fact, why I think it's probably the most serious issue. I was quite excited to be coming to your city, home of Barcelona. I didn't put a picture up of Messi today because I thought maybe. But I was remembering your Olympics, and it's obviously a few years ago, but I remember these amazing images of these divers over the city, and a few other things from the Barcelona Olympics. And of course, we in London, in my city, we had the Olympics last year, and to be honest, most Brits were dreading it. And they gave us this stupid font for the numbers, which wasn't a very good start, and they gave us these not very good mascots. So we were all thinking what we were going to do, and we knew that Beijing before had had this extraordinary opening ceremony. And the week before, we were promised sheep and cows or something like that, and we were like dreading it. And then we had this extraordinary opening ceremony. And my favorite scene from it was the scene about the Industrial Revolution. And I think as Brits, we often forget that there's something to be proud of in our history. We think about colonialism and the damage we've done in the world and all sorts of things, and our sort of fallen empire. But you know, something happened quite extraordinary in Britain when the Industrial Revolution was happening. And it was powered by steam engines like this one. Obviously, this is a fake one. From the Olympics, but this is actually a technical drawing of James Watt's steam engine. James Watt was a Scot, and he revolutionized the way that we turned fossil fuels, coal, into power. At the time he was making a steam engine, people did not even know that water was hydrogen and oxygen. He was one of the first people to suggest it was 2 parts air, is what he called it. They had no idea about latent heat, about how you take more energy to move water between different states. And yet, he built the world's most efficient and effective steam engine ever. There were many, many innovations in what he did, but one of them was this little thing in the middle here, which is called a governor. This is what it looks like. James Watt, by the way, was a brilliant marketer. He invented the term horsepower for his engines so that the mine owners would know how many horses they were replacing and therefore get a quick idea of how much money they were saving. And he called this a governor. And why did he call it a governor? Well, these 2 balls, as the steam goes into the engine, the balls move out, and that closes the valve a bit, and so the balls fall down again. And it created a mechanism in the steam engine which was self-controlling, self-regulating. Technically, it's called a dampening feedback loop. People were amazed by these governors. It wasn't the only place they were used. They were used in looms and in other factories and things. And people would travel to see this extraordinary machine that controlled itself. It didn't need a paid governor. You could build the governor into the middle of the machine. And I want to talk to you about why I think feedback loops are really, really critical for thinking about how we create better futures. Now, we don't live in the Industrial Revolution. We live in cities like this one, okay, beautifully lit at the moment, but this is London at the Olympics. And some of our cityscapes can look absolutely stunning. However, the summer before the Olympics, this was a street scene from London. Guys, girls setting buses on fire, riots. Caused a lot by situations like this. Headline on the BBC website this morning, 26% unemployment in Spain. We have a lot of people in the UK unemployed, sitting around on benches, not fulfilling their potential. You leave that situation for a while, riots happen. I don't quite understand why there's not more riots in Spain at the moment. But you're doing your contribution because we had the Indienago movement here, which I was very proud of, really campaigning about what happened in the cities and how far they'd become removed from reality. And in some ways, sometimes Anger can be used in a positive way to protest in societies. We know in the world that there's far too much of this going on. Probably 20,000 avoidable deaths each day on this planet. You can do the Live Aid thing where you go, one now, one now, one now. We have this happening to our climate. This is a NASA image of the Arctic ice cap in 1979, another one, 2003, shrinking ice caps. I actually took these images from The Economist magazine, which was proudly talking about how these shipping routes would start opening up here and we could do more trade. But ice caps melting is not necessarily in itself so bad. Ice is lighter than water, doesn't really move things around. But if all the ice comes off the top of Greenland, that's supposed to be a 6-meter rise in sea levels around Northern Europe. London has a climate change strategy that it thinks it can engineer itself out of a 4.5-meter sea level rise. But if it goes above 4.5 meters, London can't survive. I don't know what Barcelona's is. You know, if you start getting those sort of levels of sea rise, and they are probably distant in the future, but not so far. Some estimates are 80 years, some are 200. We have some problems. And this is an image from the film The Road, you know, and we seem to have a lot of apocalyptic films about the future. That, you know, we're imagining that there will be some sort of environmental catastrophe in the future. So is this going to be our future? Or can we build a more positive future that is more in harmony with nature, that is more communal, that maybe takes more time, is slower, as we've heard about, where we respect our elders and things like that? We seem to have a choice, you know, which way are we going? Are we going to turn towards hell, or are we going to take the exit utopia? I don't know if these are photoshopped or not, but I quite like them. The problem is it's not really quite as simple as that. We have what researchers have called for quite some while wicked problems. Wicked not as in cool, which is how some people use the word, not as in evil, but as in not tame, wickedly complicated. They're systemic. They're not mechanistic. Too much of our thinking is linear and thinks that, you know, going to turn this handle, something like that's going to come out of it. And we need to think about how to intervene in complex, interconnected systems where cause and effect is not easily understood. And I think we can take insights from systems thinkers in this space. So someone I like is called Stafford Beer. He's a very famous system. He said you need to think before you think. You need to frame your problems before you start thinking about them. Manfred Max Neath said you have to identify issues of primary importance. So many people spend their lives working on issues of secondary importance. And I would say that's even a political issue. I don't think it matters which party is in power. We've tried left and right and center and everything. I think it's the structure of power that we have to look at in our societies. And a more technical quote, but is from a systems theorist called Ross Ashby, which is viable systems need variety and feedback to be adaptive. We need lots of possibilities, and we need to keep learning, is basically what it is, for us to adapt towards the future. And this is really what I've tried to do with my life. This is New Economics Foundation, where I've worked. Our strapline is economics as if the people and the planet mattered. The as if is quite important, because it doesn't seem very often as if economics thinks like that. And this is our logo. And the 3 balls mean economy, planet, and people. Traditional economics thinks like this. It thinks that labor and materials feed the economy. And that's the orthodox view. And what I really think we need to do is we need to think in terms of well-being and resources, and we need to flip this arrow around. And we need to think about how the economy serves us. So instead of us being in servants of the economy should be serving human well-being. And this really is the easiest way to illustrate it now. This is economics and its relationship to the planet now. So we have here a plot of ecological footprint, which is impact on the planet, and going up is GDP per capita of nations around the world. And what you can see there is pretty much a straight line. That the richer a country is, the more impact, negative impact it's making on the planet. And this is why Kyoto, Copenhagen, Rio are so difficult, because the only way it feels like we can go is there. Is that if we're going to deal with these problems, we're going to have to give up things. And who wants to give up things? Nobody does. So we really need to think in a different way. And this is a graph of economics as if people on the planet matter, because instead of plotting GDP per capita here, we're plotting well-being. We're plotting how happy people are in nations. How long do they live? And if you go back to this one, you can see this one, we just got sort of a linear, and suddenly we can see possibilities in this space. You're probably wondering, where's Spain, okay? Spain has moderate levels of happiness, good life expectancy, 81 years, that's very healthy. You're not quite as happy. You're happier than Portugal, you'd be pleased to know. Ecological footprint is far too unsustainable. And if I put a flag of Spain on this map, you go in about there. Sustainability is somewhere over here. This is somewhere over here. These are some Arab states. That's the USA. That's Luxembourg. Over here, happy, sustainable, Costa Rica. Now, the point with this graph really is not where Spain is, but it gives you possibilities about how you can become happier and more sustainable. There are options there. As I said, Russ Ashby said, you need variety, you need possibilities if you're going to be adaptive. We can see more ways of creating good lives for people. So feedbacks and insights, they can act as like a feedback loop at a societal level. They can reflect back key information, and they can help identify positive adaptive actions. And the point is also happiness does more than that. Is actually happiness itself and emotions themselves are like feedback loops. This is a picture from a very famous piece of psychological research from the 1950s by a guy called Paul Ekman. He had this idea that we had primary emotions, things like anger and fear and disgust and sadness and happiness. They've all evolved for like an evolutionary purpose. So they're evoked by typical situations. Emotions are more than feeling states. The word emotion means move out. They are linked to actions. So fear is typically about a source of danger. Anger, a violation of a norm. Sadness, about a loss of a support system. And they immediately provoke actions within the organism. So we detect things if we're frightened and evade them. If there's a rustle in the grass, it pays us to think it might be a lion or a tiger. And then if we do spot one, it doesn't pay us to think how beautiful they are. Their stripes are lovely. We actually get terrified and run away the other way. That's helped our ancestors, and all of us come from our ancestors. It's helped them survive and thrive. So all of these are evolutionarily important. But what about happiness? What is the evolutionary purpose of happiness? Now, happiness is a very general word, and we can use it in many ways. But in some ways, there's sort of two types, and this is a simplification. But there's sort of high-energy happiness, which might be enthusiasm. And then there's a low energy, which is about contentment. And broadly, enthusiasm is about opportunities, and contentment is about achievements. And the opportunities are about mobilizing energy. If suddenly there's a possibility to find some prey, we mobilize energy and we go for it. Contentment is about learning from achievements, reflecting, renewing, restoring our energy. So the big take-home message is that the so-called negative emotions are about negative things in the environment. They're about threats. The positive ones are about opportunities and achievements. Think about that in the workplace. So they can act, emotions act like internal feedback loops. They responding to key information in our environments, and they're triggering positive adaptive actions. But the point here is also we can see what these emotions are. If these emotions were only about my own functioning, why do I display them? I only need to feel them myself. But they're contagious emotions. We coordinate them. These families are all looking the same. We share them. Happiness, we laugh much more in the company of people on our own. In fact, it looks slightly mad if you laugh on your own. Do you get that, Carlos? We communicate with them. We communicate. These women are gossiping. We communicate with our emotions. They're very, very contagious. And we can see this in the workplace. This is a researcher called Barbara Fredrickson. She studied over 60 teams. And what she showed was that the high-performing teams displayed much more positive emotions than negative emotions. And in fact, the gradient is absolutely massive. The high-performing teams had 5 or 6 times as many positive emotions to every negative, and the low-performing ones, 3 negative to every positive. They were very, very different fields of teams. They draw this fantastic complexity diagram. And basically, this is a possibility space, which is that the high-performing teams can be creative and high energy, which is up here. They can be anywhere. The low-performing teams always collapse into low-energy, non-creative spaces. We've all been to these meetings where we've been bored stiff and nothing new has come out of them. Yeah? These are the fun ones to be in. They show that you need to have a ratio of 3 to 1 up to 8 to 1 to be a high-performing, functioning team. They actually show if you go over 8 to 1, you collapse into a space where you all just agree with each other and nothing much happens either. There's always something else going on there. Their research shows that happiness at work is related to performance, but not that it's causal. It's not showing, this is a cross-sectional survey, it is showing that the two are related. So, we can actually look at some research that answers this sort of question. Does happiness come from high performance, or does happiness lead to high performance, or is it both? This is research from Gallup. They have a lot of data. 140,000 people in this sample. They looked at happiness at time 1 and performance at time 1. Happiness at time 2, performance at time 2. Is it this? Happiness to leading performance? Is it this? Performance leading to happiness? Is it both? They did something which is called structural equation modeling. Some of you may understand that. Sometimes called pathway analysis. Basically, it's the closest we can get to statistical proof of causality. It does not technically prove causality. It's the closest we get to it. The researchers concluded both models fitted the data, but model 1 was better. And it said these data suggest that the impact of happiness at work on performance is twice as large as from performance to happiness. That's spectacular. For Carlos to be able to do work in this area, he only needed this to be possible that happiness could lead to performance. It's twice as strong, twice as strong. So success follows happiness is the big take-home message around this. So again, we've got things about happiness at work. It builds more adaptive team. It leads to higher performance, but it still isn't taken seriously in business. Still isn't taken seriously in organizations. Most people don't think the things go together. This is Daniel Pink, famous US management sort of guru. And he's got a nice quote on this. He says that feedback comes in the form of a once-a-year, awkward, 40-minute conversation with your boss. It's a feedback desert. If anyone's ever done a 360 review, they're either full of platitudes or just too much negative stuff. And we need to get this more into real time. We need to create happiness engines in organizations. We need to think, what would be the governor? Maybe they need to be called the HR boss or something. I don't know what they need to be marketed as. And this is what I'm trying to do now as a statistician, is to create numbers that create feedback loops in organizations about people's experience. Because I think we need these adaptive things. We don't want people just going off, the whole year in the wrong direction and then slowly tacking back, but actually more daily, more real-time feedback loops that start to mimic the way that emotions work, the way that governors work in steam engines. And then, if we think that we want to rebuild a new world, we want to have a new revolution, we can start to use these to create happiness in the sky, but also remembering all along that we only have one planet to all share. Thank you very much.